Hey guys, this is a video response to Gemini686 about his video on wrestling being fake. If you guys haven't checked out his video already, I highly recommend you guys go check that out. It's one video that was very, it was very long overdue by him being the big fan that he is. I felt that he made really good points and it kind of inspired me to make my own video. All my thoughts on, people saying wrestling's fake and just the stuff that's been thrown at me when it comes to being a wrestling fan. So obviously I've been insulted lots of times, pretty much the same insult every time. It's usually the one of the three being wrestling's fake, or you like greasy sweaty men touching each other bullshit, and half naked men in Speedos, which kind of mean you're gay if you watch that kind of stuff. And that's all people really have to say. They don't have really much more to say because half of them used to watch wrestling, so they can't really say anything else besides that. Or they say like, oh, you're still living in the past, it's time for you to grow up. Wrestling was like, it was cool when you were a kid, but now it's kind of like played out and it's for, losers and people with no lives, and say that. And there's been one guy, I'm not going to say his name or anything, but he never watched wrestling before in his childhood. He only watches UFC, and I asked him to watch one match just to, get his thoughts on it, just for him to, expand his mind a little bit more. And it was Edge versus Mick Foley at WrestleMania 22. And he was one of those guys who you could show him all the matches you want, you could tell him all the facts you want, and all he'll say is he'll make a stupid comment about it. Like, he watched the WrestleMania 22 match, and I asked him what he thought, and he said the spot where Edge fell into the thumbtacks. He said that the thumbtacks were made out of rubber, and the tips of them were covered in super glue, and Edge fell on them, which made them stick to his back, and the blood started coming because Edge had ketchup packets glued to his back and covered in makeup. So it's just stuff like that, he has no idea what he's talking about, and he's serious about this too. Like, I showed him like old ECW stuff, and he's like, oh, they just have ketchup packets to their heads, or he didn't think they cut themselves. All it was ketchup and rubber objects. So that's one guy. And the second guy is also a UFC fan, but he's a bigger UFC fan than the first guy. And he was one of those guys who was a big fan in the Attitude Era. He knew a lot of stuff from the past, which I gave him credit for. But I met him in grade 9 in French class, and I think the first day of school I wore my Eddie Guerrero Scarface shirt, so he knew I was a wrestling fan from there. And he was cool from it at first, but once we started getting to know each other, he kind of started throwing the jokes at me, like, oh, wrestling's fake, and you watch Spetty greasy men in Speedos. And so once UFC started becoming more popular, which was, grade 11, grade 12 for me, which was 3-4 years ago, he started turning more on wrestling. And I remember one day, he was one of those guys who had no idea there was more promotions out there besides UFC. Like MMA promotions like Strikeforce and K1 and all those ones, and Pride and all that. He thought UFC was the only one brand, and he looked like one of those guys too, because he wore like the Chuck Liddell shirts and the Rampage shirts. So in mine and Legend Killer 410's word, he was a casual fan. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I'm not going to go too in detail on it, and I'll save that for another time. But you could tell a casual fan from when you see one. So I thought I'd go up to him as a joke and just say, and I said, so I hear you're a big MMA fan now. And he got mad. He's like, dude, I fucking told you 10 times. I don't watch MMA, I just watch UFC. And then I kind of started laughing about it. I'm like, dude, MMA is UFC. It's mixed martial arts. And he didn't say anything about it. He's like, okay, well, I only watch one promotion and that's it. He's like, but you watch fucking greasy men in Speedo, so why don't you go jack off to a picture of Batista? I'm like, whatever, man. And I still talk to him today. It's just I think he's grown up a little bit now since then, so now he doesn't really bother him. And what I thought that was the deal with everybody else. Once you hit 19 years old, you kind of get out of the phase and you kind of accept that your friends watch wrestling. But in my school right now, there's this one guy who's a big UFC fan, and it was the Couture and Lesnar fight. I was all behind Lesnar because he was the wrestling guy. He was all behind Couture because he hates wrestling. And I remember when Lesnar won, I was so happy the next day because I looked at him and I just started laughing. And he just started swearing and saying how Lesnar's on steroids, and all these wrestling guys are coming in on steroids and pretty much ruining the sport altogether. And for that, you can't really blame him, because I wouldn't be mad, but I was kind of rubbing it in a little bit more, saying like, oh, I thought wrestling was fake. How can a guy in a fake sport come into UFC, which is known as the real sport, and beat the shit out of pretty much your best fighter and your most legendary fighter, Randy Couture? And he had nothing to say to it except Lesnar's on steroids and Lesnar's this and Lesnar's that. I just want to see how much time I got left on this. I got 5 minutes. So more to like a, what do you call it, like a media standpoint of wrestling, Gemini made a good point saying the media does not take wrestling very seriously at all. They always laugh and they always make jokes when it comes to talking about wrestling. And the perfect example would be the Chris Benoit situation, and you had John Cena on CNN, and they totally edited that interview up to make John Cena look bad. Also, they also had what happened? Ultimate Warrior came on the show, and he pretty much stood up for all wrestling fans and saying that it's not fake, and if you guys want to get in the ring with me, I'll beat the shit out of you and all that. And the news reporters got, they got worried because they knew this guy was serious, and they just made a joke out of it, saying this isn't wrestling, you're in the real world now. And Warrior didn't take no bullshit. He called the guy out, and the guy did nothing to say, and then they just kind of made a political joke about it, and they just kind of shoved it off like that. And also, the media doesn't know anything about wrestling, but then again, they talk like they have all the inside stuff on it. Like, I remember one guy pronounced John Cena's name wrong. He called him John Cena instead of John Cena, which is where Santino's joke came in on the December 22nd edition of Raw of last year. He made a joke about that, and they called SmackDown SmackDawn, and just stuff like that. They don't research anything. They just have a little piece of paper in front of them and just say whatever pretty much someone writes it for them. And last thing I want to talk about is the wrestling YouTube community. Everyone on the YouTube community, I'm sure, if you're a wrestling fan, have gotten made fun of at some point in your life. And the fact that people on YouTube make fun of other people on YouTube being a wrestling fan is kind of beyond me. Like, if you have a John Cena fan, you'll have a wrestling fan go up to him and say, oh, you like John Cena, you're an idiot, and John Cena's this, John Cena's that, and how can you be a wrestling fan if you like John Cena, Batista, who else? Just guys like that, like, those guys who can't wrestle, and if you like them, you're not a wrestling fan, you're known as an idiot fan. And if you like Shawn Michaels and Shelton Benjamin, you're automatically known as a Smart Mark fan. And it's just stuff like that. And if you can't see the business side of things when it comes to John Cena and Batista getting the push that they do, you're not really, I don't know how, the sun's kind of covering up by the crowd, the lighting probably got messed up right now. But I don't know how you could say that kind of stuff when you get bullied so much as a wrestling fan. We shouldn't be fighting with each other. We should all be like sticking together, because we get made fun of so much, by comments, by video responses, by people rating our videos 1 star because we're talking about wrestling. But then again, we make fun of each other because one guy likes John Cena and one guy likes Shawn Michaels. So I'm sure there's going to be one more video response to Gemini's video. Legend Killer 410, he said he was thinking about making a video, so look forward to that, and I'll see you guys next time.